You're having a good time on the couch with your friends. You're having a good time in the bed alone. You're having a good time watching TV. Let us ruin your day. Yay!
Welcome to Now It's Ruined, the podcast for people who hate enjoying things, and the podcast that makes you say, oh my god, and but of course. I'm Kate Bridle.
And I'm Larkin Harrington.
And today I'm going to ruin bananas. Larkin is wearing an incredible shirt covered in bananas. I wish I had one. I did literally just eat a banana, though, and it was a Chiquita banana, and I really don't feel good about that after this, but here we go. Yesterday, actually, I was walking to the store, and a Chiquita banana truck went by in front of me. For a second, I was like, what if I had stepped into that crosswalk and been hit by a Chiquita banana truck? The conspiracy theories that would fly, like Big Banana got her. She was researching.
She was too... They had to silence her.
Well, before we get more into why I feel so guilty about eating a Chiquita banana, some housekeeping. First, speaking of things going bananas, our numbers really spiked in October. We have no idea why or how, but we love and appreciate all of you who have spread the word and told your friends and your enemies. It's been really dramatic, actually. We smoked our listener numbers from prior months, like when we weren't even halfway through. So thank you. Keep going. Another really helpful thing you can do besides just spreading the word about us is if you haven't already, rate and review us on the platform where you listen. That helps us get shown to more people. And of course, come follow us on Instagram, Patreon, and YouTube. And speaking of Patreon, we have a shout out to a new paid member at the end, so stick around for that. We also actually lost our first paid member.
That's right.
They left our paid tier, which is fine. We understand. We do notice, but we're not going to fault you for it.
We do notice, and we cry.
We cry just to ourselves, and then we move on. No. If you ever have to give up your paid patronage of us, please know we will harbor no resentment. Update on the listener wars, state-to-state listener wars. Texas has jumped into third place. Also, Sweden popped up on our listener map. So we got some Scandies in. So get ready for us to be endlessly bitter at you because of how healthy and well-adjusted you are. I would maybe rather be imprisoned in Scandinavia than free in the United States right now. I don't know. Just a thought I have sometimes.
The quiet thoughts we have in the shower, sobbing in our jorts. I could be a prisoner in Scandinavia right now.
I could be meeting my second husband, the Norwegian prison guard right now. Finally, we have been receiving many guesses about the Colin Hanks jar.
Already?
Pretty wide-ranging, too. We got some high numbers thrown out there. So in case you missed it, we are accepting guesses about how much money you think will be in the Colin Hanks jar when we fill it up someday, which might not ever happen. We'll see. And the person who's closest, without going over, will win a little clay creation of Larkin's making. So comment wherever, message us. I feel like I should say something about him because I feel like otherwise we're never gonna fill it up. And to be clear, like for anyone who might be concerned, I'm not like stalking Colin Hanks. I don't. He was just kind of a like hyperfixation of mine a few years ago, and then it became such a running joke that I like learned more about him almost partially as an actual like hyperfixation and then partially as like to keep the joke going.
I mean, this is one of Kate's superpowers. She absorbs this content and just locks it. You're like a walking factoid encyclopedia person.
Here's a fun fact that I learned about him. He has a vinyl collection, which would normally make me roll my eyes because like how Gen X like hipstery. But actually the way he does it I think is really cool because what he does is like every place that he goes, so for regular travel or for filming or whatever, he finds a local record store and he buys something from there and then he like labels it with where it's from and like what the store was. It's like his way of collecting souvenirs from all the places that he's been, which I think is really cool.
That is actually pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah. So that's your Colin Hanks fact and quarter in the jar. All right. So Larkin, first off, do you like bananas?
I love bananas.
Me too.
I do. Yeah. I don't like banana smell. I don't like the strings. And I don't like the fact that sometimes I'll find the perfect banana and the next day it's deceased.
But then you can make banana bread.
That's true. How do you open your banana?
Okay,
Okay.
Table that. We are not saying don't eat bananas. They are super duper good for you. Eat all the bananas, but you're going to have some shit to think about while you're eating them. I also want to say, and I've given this disclaimer before, but in case you missed it, there are a lot of names and words in Spanish in this episode. And because my mother was from Uruguay and was a native Spanish speaker, I always do my best to pronounce Spanish words well, which can make me sound like an intolerable, like, white lady news anchor who's like rolling her R's out of nowhere. But it is out of a genuine respect for my mother's native tongue and knowing that she would cringe at mispronunciations. So that being said, I'm also not perfect at it. So I'm going to be inconsistent. And I'm not going to be like Costa Rica like every time. I'm just not doing it. So I'm going to say Costa Rica. Then I'm going to say other stuff more accurately. And that's just how life is. So if you listened to episode 11 of Now It's Ruined about bacon and eggs, you will know a little bit about what I'm about to tell you, but I wanted to elaborate because there is so much more shit that I did not get to touch on, and I'm really still only scratching the surface. I'm gonna have to leave a lot out, but I'm gonna try and give you all of the big hits. I want to start with some not quite as dramatic banana facts that some people still find like upsetting or disturbing or ruinous. So first, I'm sure a lot of folks have heard this one, bananas are radioactive. They have a tiny, tiny amount of naturally occurring radiation from their potassium content. So all potassium is a little bit radioactive. So anything with potassium in it is a little bit radioactive. According to the EPA, you would have to eat about 100 bananas to be exposed even to the same amount of radiation exposure you just get being alive in the United States any given day. All right, fact number 2. This is what Larkin alluded to earlier. If you are peeling bananas from the stem end, you're doing it wrong.
Yep, and it fills people with a rage when you tell them that.
Yes. And actually, I hate saying that. I that's dramatic. I hate those clickbaity articles that are like, bobby pins, you're using them wrong. Like, no, fuck you. But I did find a great Refinery 29 article entitled, "What is the right way to eat a banana? A very serious investigation." So there are some compelling reasons to peel a banana from the bottom, the non-stem end, and not...
I've tried. It doesn't work out.
I always peel mine from the bottom.
It gets all smashed.
I find it less so than the stem end where you're like jamming it around and then you smash it because you're trying to twist the stem off.
Okay, well,
We're going to have to... I'll eat another banana after we record this and I'll show you how I do it. This is where I learned it, was working with the chimpanzees, which Larkin and I did in college together. Chimps don't peel bananas from the stem side. They peel from the bottom. And they use the stem as a handle. So that's one reason. And also, apparently, peeling it from the bottom helps you avoid those stringy bits that you hate. So they actually, more of them come off when you peel from the bottom than from the stem side. Okay. In my opinion, the skin comes off more easily from that end than, but in your experience, it sounds like you have the opposite problem. So maybe that's not universal.
Maybe it's user error because...
This is one of my favorite facts. I learned this in Hawaii, and every time I tell it to someone, it really upsets them for some reason. Bananas are technically an herb.
No. What? No, I can't.
Okay, so we call them... The dude will not abide. So we call them banana trees, but they're technically banana herbs. And the difference is that banana plants don't have woody stems or trunks like trees. Instead, they have what is referred to as a succulent stalk, which definitely sounds like a euphemism for penis. And is not the last thing in this episode that is going to sound like a euphemism for penis.
Excellent news. Well, I mean, they're very phallic.
They are. They're one of the most phallic foods out there. So the succulent stalk.
I need you to stop saying that. I lovingly request.
You want to get on my succulent stalk?
Get on? The way do you want to get on?
Would you like to participate in my... I'd make a great dude.
All the queers and ladies out there are getting real hot and bothered right now. Would you like to ascend my succulent stalk?
Anyway, so the succulent stalk is layered in leaves that are growing around it. So it's like all of these layers of leaves kind of like wrapped together that form the succulent stalk. And then they eventually spread out from it at the top. That is an herb, is all of these layers of leaves that form the succulent stalk and then branch out rather than like a woody stem. Additionally, because their fruit is produced from a single ovary from a banana flower, bananas are also technically berries. My final fact that is not the full ruin of atrocities is about banana flavoring. Banana runts are my favorite of the runts.
I haven't had a runt in 3 decades.
I haven't either, but when I did, I really only wanted the banana ones.
Interesting.
You've mentioned you are not a fan of the banana flavoring, right?
Not a lot of the time.
Yeah, like Laffy Taffy, etc. Do you think it tastes like a banana?
No, I don't. Sometimes like a banana popsicle has been successful, but maybe that's shaped
It's the shape. This is dick-shaped, probably a banana. If you eat banana-flavored candy like Runts, Laffy Taffy, whatever, you might go, well, that is not banana at all, but it actually technically is. It's just kind of based on a type of banana that doesn't exist anymore. So prior to the mid-19th century, most Americans had never tasted a real banana. The genesis of the banana coming to America in earnest can be traced back to the 1876 Philadelphia Centennial. They had a stand there and they were selling bananas for like a dime each, which back then was like spending $3 something on a single banana, but they were a novelty, you know.
How much could a banana cost, Michael?
Exactly. Speaking of articles with great titles, there's one by The Nation that I also used for this that was called How Much Could a Banana Republic Cost?
Oh, nice.
But yeah, I had a lot of Arrested Development references running through my head in this, a lot of Holla Back Girl, and then that dumb sketch from SNL where Cecily Strong is like the British girl, and she has the song about bananas, and she's like, long banana, short banana, white banana, banana. Anyway, so 1876 was the first time that a lot of Americans had actually bitten into a banana, but they had actually been experiencing banana flavoring in like confections and candy and stuff for at least the last decade or so. Food scientists had created synthetic banana flavoring sometime in the 1850s to 1860s. The scientists didn't really go for like an exact, subtle, nuanced recreation of like banana flavor. They just kind of were like, ballpark.
Nailed it.
Yeah, they settled for this kind of general fruity flavor that came mostly from a compound called isomyl acetate, which occurs naturally in some fruits. And the interesting thing about the compound is it's like kind of just this blank fruity slate that will smell different to different people depending on what they've been told it smells like. So Americans, we had it marketed to us as banana flavoring. So we are like, that's fake banana. British people had it marketed to them as pear. So they smell pear.
Oh.
So even though isomyl acetate isn't technically like full accurate banana flavor, it does have ties to an extinct type of banana more than it does the modern day banana. So there were some types of red and yellow bananas in the United States prior to 1876, but they were luxury products. But at some point, we were introduced to a certain banana, the Gros Michel or Big Mike.
Oh, well, hell yeah.
Speaking of euphemisms, I want the Big Mike from that succulent stalk over there. Definitely just sounds like a dildo.
Oh, yeah. We have the accommodating Adam. And the Big Mike.
And the Big Mike. If you want to get serious, we got to start a sex shop, I think. The Silky Promises condom line. The accommodating Adam dildo. So anyway, the Big Mike came from the island of Martinique, and it was the dominant type of banana in the US for a very long time. However, bananas are one of Larkin's favorite things, a monoculture.
Yeah. Yep.
So one type of crop is grown in an area with no backup types. This allows for mass production, but obviously also means there's no biological protection against blights, diseases, whatever that might strike them. So if you're only growing one kind of banana like the Big Mike, and a fungus comes along that really goes to town on the Big Mike, you have no backup. And that is exactly what happened to the Big Mike in the 1950s. And basically the entire species died off. So banana growers pivoted to the fungus-resistant Cavendish banana, which is what we eat to this day. But here's the thing. The Big Mike contained more isomyl acetate than the Cavendish does. So it would have tasted more like that fake banana flavoring that we know of than current bananas do.
Interesting. It's also so weird that we had fake banana before we got banana.
Right. All right, so those were my light facts.
Ease us in with the Big Mike.
I eased you in. Started you with the Big Mike, which might sound harsh, but trust me.
I believe you.
Just need to train. You just need to train to take the Big Mike. Okay, so we've probably all heard the term Banana Republic. At the very least, you've probably heard of the store Banana Republic, which is a very interesting choice of store name.
Unfairly amassed wealth.
Yeah.
Come buy this polo that makes you look like you ran a
Banana Republic. Yeah,
You
exactly.
piece of shit.
Two of my favorite coats are from Banana Republic, so...
Oh,
thanks.
so sorry.
The term Banana Republic was first used by the American author O. Henry in a short story that he wrote in 1901, and in it he referred to a fictional country in the story as a Banana Republic, meaning that its economy was based entirely on the sale of bananas, and this was based on his experience in Honduras. The term then came to be used in a derogatory sense to describe countries with economies that depended entirely on one product or industry. These countries have a few characteristics in common. They tend to be controlled by a foreign entity, like a foreign company or industry.
Right.
They typically have corrupt, unstable governments that are run by a small number of elite rich people, while many other citizens are forced to live in poverty. And there is no control of the state through representatives of the people. Its infrastructure is entirely controlled by whatever entity owns it. And while the term is now a catch-all for all countries that show those features, they're called banana republics for a reason. And that reason is thanks to a company that ran many of these so-called republics, because they were definitely not republics. A company that is now known as Chiquita, but was formerly called United Fruit.
Oh, and here it is. Bernays!
Some banana history, though, first. Bananas are old as hell. In fact, many scientists believe that they might have been the first fruit ever on Earth.
Oh, okay.
They are thought to have first grown up to 10,000 years ago in the area around Malaysia. And then trade and travel started bringing the banana back to other areas like Africa, India, and Polynesia. The Pali Canon, which is a set of Buddhist scriptures, contains references to Indian travelers tasting bananas and bringing them back to India in 600 BC.
Wow.
The Western world has Alexander the Great to thank for our introduction to bananas. He invaded India in 327 BC and brought bananas over to more Western areas after he tasted them. So originally, bananas were actually not that great. They were not a lot of pulp and a whole lot of seeds. So basically the exact opposite of what they are now. Our lovely pulpy modern day bananas started developing in Africa around 650 AD. And they started crossbreeding bananas to get rid of the seeds and increase the pulpy part. The first banana plantations sprung up along the coast of the Indian Ocean between the 5th and 15th centuries. When the Portuguese discovered bananas in West Africa, they started plantations on the Canary Islands in the 15th century. And then between the 16th and 19th centuries, bananas started being traded in the Americas. More plantations sprung up in like Latin America, the Caribbean, stuff like that. Since the Big Mike was stricken with plague, the Cavendish banana is the one that we eat now, and that is named for William George Spencer Cavendish, the 6th Duke of Devonshire.
Oh, please.
I didn't want to take a ton of time learning about him, so these are Wikipedia facts, just my caveat. But from what I saw, he actually wasn't the worst person in the world. He was an abolitionist, so he was anti-slavery. He also reduced factory working hours. And he was very interested in horticulture. He was the president of the Royal Horticulture Society for 20 years. And that's how he came to acquire an early specimen of a particular type of banana that he, or rather his gardener, grew in his greenhouse. This was the Cavendish banana, the banana that we all know and love today. So United Fruit was formed by several companies coming together. The two main companies were the Tropical Trading and Transport Company and the Boston Fruit Company. Let's start with Tropical Trading and Transport. Triple T.
Yeah, I was like, it's a catchy name.
Its founder was a man named Minor Keith, and that would be minor as in A minor, M-I-N-O-R.
Thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome. Keith's life was like privileged white boy fails up. So he started his business career in New York before he was an adult. He had a store on Broadway, apparently selling men's furnishings.
A pardon?
I don't know.
You know what comes to mind is that elephant foot ashtray. Or like strap-ons. But they don't need strap-ons. Just leather daddy stuff.
Some men might. Penises are not always the Big Mike.
They're not always the Big Mike, or
There's
you
no
might
shame.
just not anatomically have one as a man.
That's right. Anyway, men's furnishings. Presumably full of strap-ons. After the men's furnishings, he did a year in lumber, and eventually he moved to Texas to raise cattle. Keith managed to establish himself in the cattle business, partially because he was able to move to an island in 1869 that his father literally owned in Texas.
Oh my God.
And somewhere in this time period, he developed a special interest in trains. So trains and railroads became Keith's new ambition. And lucky for him, his brother Henry was already working on railroads, so he had an in. Brother Henry, was down in Costa Rica developing a railroad between Puerto Limon and San Jose. And in 1871, Keith went down and joined his brother in Costa Rica to help out with the railroad. Their uncle, who was also named Henry Meigs, was the one who held the contracts with the Costa Rican government to build this railroad. So their uncle has the contract, and he hires his nephews. Meigs, Uncle Henry, was a hell of a character. I wish I had time, honestly, to go more into him, but I do at least want to give you some cursory shit. He was a businessman in San Francisco, and he got himself into absolute assloads of debt. He also broke a bunch of laws. Eventually, all this caught up with him, and he fled to Chile to avoid justice. But allegedly, He didn't tell anybody that that's where they were going, including his wife, who apparently didn't know about like the debt and the crimes and all of this, based on what I read. He left a fire burning in their house in the hearth, and he told like their friends that they were just going for a cruise around San Francisco Bay. I don't know what he told his wife, because they left all their shit, and he had outfitted a ship. He put his wife and his kids, I think, on this ship, and then was like, surprised we're going to Chile.
Oh my God, can you imagine?
What did she think was happening? You're just like, it's getting a little late. Should we go back to the... No? The Chilean government tried to catch him for a while. Like, as soon as he landed, the U.S. was like, hey, this guy's down there. He's pulled all this bullshit. Send him back to us. And Chile was like, sure. But he kept evading arrest. And eventually they were like, you know what? We give up. And then they contracted with him to build a railroad. What? The Chilean government hired this man who they knew was a fraudster and like had all these issues to build them a railroad.
That's because there has to be so much else going on in that story. Oh my God.
I know. As questionable as that move on the Chilean government's
right?
behalf seems to us, it actually worked out. He wound up completing several successful railway projects for the Chilean government, and he got a good reputation for how he ran things, and that reputation carried him to Peru, where he started building more railroads. And by the way, how he ran things was exploiting Chinese railway workers who were cheaper labor than using local Chileans and Peruvians. At this point, Meigs got the contract with the Costa Rican government, and when his nephew, Minor, was just 23, Uncle Henry Meigs decided to hand those contracts over to him. And suddenly, 23-year-old Keith was in charge of building a whole ass railroad in Costa Rica. Some places I also saw that he like didn't take over fully until Meigs died in 1877. But most say he was like pretty much in charge from 1871 onward.
With no experience.
No.
Wow.
It's his new career. Look, listen, I'm all about a career change. I'm all about a pivot. Yeah. God knows.
For sure.
But don't just put a 23-year-old fuckabout in charge of a railroad.
Must be nice.
Right. Oh, you like railroads? Here's one. Build it.
Here's a railroad.
So railroads are a thing that'll definitely get their own episode one of these days because they were absolutely brutal to build.
Oh, yeah.
In 1873, Keith brought over 600 Chinese workers, 300 of whom died of malaria soon after they arrived. So half of them just gone. By the time just 25 miles of the railroad were completed, 4,000 men had died. 4,000 people for 25 miles of railroad. The project hemorrhaged money. And then Costa Rica was also part of an international financial crisis, and they defaulted on their payments. And so he couldn't pay his workers. But the Costa Rican government did give him some compensation for his efforts. Since they could not give him any money, they offered him 800,000 acres of tax-free land, 9% of the national territory of Costa Rica. What? So again, this guy's fucking up. This project sucks. 4,000 men
lost
die.
4,000 people.
Here's 800,000 acres of tax-free land for you. So Keith was already involved in the banana game before he got all of this land. He planted his first banana in 1872, and he started shipping them back to New Orleans on his brother's ship and selling them at exorbitantly high prices. Again, must be nice. You just have a ship that your brother owns.
Here's some land. Yeah, your brother has a ship.
Fucking use it for whatever, dude. Sure, put your bananas on it. In 1878, Keith opened up a store in Nicaragua, which was not a banana store exclusively, but it did enable him to ship more bananas to the U.S. through the use of the store, which he started doing in earnest in 1882, so 2 years before he got that land from the Costa Rican government. And when bananas started proving to be a good business, he handed the store in Nicaragua over to an associate, and he dedicated himself full-time to bananas. He's all in on bananas.
All in.
So we pivoted again. Now we're all about the bananas. And eventually he used that Costa Rican land to grow more bananas. By 1898, Keith was a very dominant figure in the banana market. He had a presence in Colombia as well as Costa Rica and other countries. He owned 3 companies. But in 1898 to 1899, a major New York broker with whom he had substantial investments went bankrupt, and he lost a shit ton of money. At this point, he realized that in order to survive, he needed to strike up a deal with his biggest competitor, the Boston Fruit Company. Boston Fruit was founded by Lorenzo Dow Baker, Jesse Freeman, and Andrew Preston. Baker was a man of the sea. I mean, really. So he grew up near Cape Cod in Massachusetts, and he first went to sea at 10 years old.
Oh, yeah. Merman.
Yeah, so by age 20, he was a captain. And a few years later, he bought his own schooner and started taking goods from New England further south. Actually seems like he might have worked for what he had. The story goes that Baker was on a trip back to Venezuela when he happened to stop in Jamaica for repairs, and while waiting to get his boat fixed, he started poking around and was like, I wonder if there's any product here that like I can maybe load up and sell back in the US. And the portmaster suggested bananas. So Baker was like, sure, why not? I'll give it a shot. And he left Jamaica with 608 bunches of green bananas, and then he managed to sell the whole lot to a grocer in Jersey City. So he was like, well, that was easy. Let's do more bananas. Back to Jamaica we go.
More of that.
So he grabs over 1,400 bunches of bananas this time, and he heads up to Boston to sell them. So the produce company that bought this shipment in Boston was owned by Jesse Freeman, and also employed at this company was an ambitious young clerk named Andrew Preston. And in 1885, Freeman and Baker decided to combine their companies and form Boston Fruit, and then eventually Preston also became a partner. Baker really loved Jamaica. He was very happy when he got to serve as the tropical manager of Boston Fruit because he got to live in Jamaica and just manage the business in the tropics, while Freeman and Preston are up in Boston freezing their asses off half the year. But then in 1890, Jesse Freeman, his partner, died, and this death left Baker in charge as president of the whole company. But he refused to relocate to Boston. He was like, no.
No.
I'm going to keep living in Jamaica, thanks. After years of this, Andrew Preston got really fed up about it, and in 1899, he forced Baker out and took control of Boston Fruit. Which I kind of, you're like, dude, like our business operations are here. We need you here, especially in those days. It's not like you can jump on a Zoom call.
Right. Yeah.
And like run your business. So Preston's
Letters.
like, I'm running the business. You're just fucking around in Jamaica. Yeah, fuck you. I kind of get Preston's vibe on that one.
I get it.
Again, this was 1899, which, if you recall, was also the year that Keith had financial issues and was looking for ways to stay afloat. So Preston agreed to a merger with Keith's company, and United Fruit was born. Early on, United Fruit had worker retention issues at their plantations, especially those that were like on the land given to Keith in Costa Rica, because the land was really remote and it was tough to motivate people to like come and work there, especially when they had alternative places they could work, like coffee plantations in Costa Rica. That was a big industry there. They were like, why would I go fucking die of malaria to grow bananas in the middle of nowhere when I could just work on this coffee plantation and not? People were getting all these tropical diseases and they were dying because they had no medical care in these remote areas, and there was a lot of turnover as a result. To solve this problem, United Fruit started investing more in infrastructure around their plantations, like hospitals, parks, housing, and other amenities for its workforce, which of course starts making the country of Costa Rica more and more dependent on United Fruit's benevolence and money. Very like Google campus vibes, right? This amenities-focused approach did work in a way. Households who were employed by United Fruit were statistically more prosperous than their non-United Fruit employed counterparts, but of course they were also totally dependent on United Fruit for like their entire lifestyle. So Costa Rica is the blueprint that United Fruit would use down the line. They would accept land concessions in exchange for funding big infrastructure projects like railroads or phone lines, and then use the land that they got as part of this deal to grow bananas and other crops. And then they would invest in hospitals, schools, all of that stuff around the plantations until the country was completely dependent on them to sustain its economy and its infrastructure. They also ran the mail systems, radio systems, as I mentioned, phone lines, the power grids. They ran everything. I'm sure we've all heard of company towns at some point. Like,
yeah.
United Fruit was making company countries.
Right.
So the company kept expanding throughout the Caribbean and Latin America. In fact, apart from commissioned companies such as the British and Dutch East India companies, United Fruit was the first multinational corporation in the world. And they used business strategies we now recognize and maybe roll our eyes at, like vertical integration,
God. Yeah.
A company takes control of all levels of the supply chain rather than working with individual contractors. So a company is in charge of harvesting, packing, shipping, the whole 9 yards from beginning to end of production versus hiring contractors for each of those individual things, which is more expensive. This was a new concept back when United Fruit started doing it. It was part of the managerial revolution that we have to thank for big business as we know it today. Thanks so much, managerial revolution. I read a really interesting article that points to United Fruit as one of the missing links between a period of time when charter companies like the East India Company were blatantly colonialist in their purposes, and then modern companies, which tend to put on a good public face and hide their like colonialist ideals. So there was a time period when it was totally acceptable for that to be the case, and then there was a time period when it became completely unacceptable, and United Fruit kind of skirted that middle ground and adjusted their policies from the one end of it to the other. So they started out very like, yeah, we're going in and we're colonizing these places and fuck all y'all. And eventually they eased back to be more like, oh, look at what we're doing for the locals, you know, look at these resources we're bringing to these under-resourced countries, you know.
Yep.
Like as public perception is shifting. Sorry, a man with a massive penis just drove by on a very loud motorcycle.
Don't get him. It's Big Mike.
It's Big Mike. Huge succulent stock on that guy.
Just massive.
I'm surprised he can even sit on the bike. So from quite early, United Fruit invested in propaganda to push the narrative that they were a benevolent force bringing civilization or whatever to Latin countries. Back to Andrew Preston, president of United Fruit. So under his guidance, the company grew fast. By 1905, they were the dominant force in the fruit trade, and by 1910, they owned 115 ships, one of the largest privately owned fleets in the country. And this group of ships became known as the Great White Fleet.
Oh.
All the ships were white. Second meaning, I leave to everyone else. The fleet started to ship goods to and from the countries where United Fruit did business, but eventually they realized they could make even more money if, apart from just shipping goods, they also offered travel options for people who wanted to explore these exotic areas. And so they decided to feed two birds with one stone and started offering cruises. So they built ships that were for luxury travel as well as for shipping, and they started making bank. The Great White Fleet still exists. It is owned by Chiquita, and it's their shipping fleet.
Do they still cruise?
I read somewhere that they do. Their website didn't seem like they do. I don't know. So in addition to cruise passengers and bananas, these ships also carried mail and other cargo that was required by countries in the Caribbean, which meant if there was a strike or a disagreement, United Fruit could just be like, okay, then you're cut off. Like Preston has the power to just shut down commerce in an entire country if they're not behaving how he wants them to. Because of its enormous reach and its many arms, the company became known as El Pulpo, or the octopus. In addition to atrocities that I will get into in just a minute, United Fruit operated in a way that was super duper racist. Their corporate structure mimicked strategies used in European colonialism, as did much of how they operated, running phone lines for a country. Very British in India, right? Telegraph lines. So at the top of United Fruit's corporate structure, in all the best paying and most elite jobs, were white people or elite Latin Americans. At the bottom were local populations in the plantation areas, or in the case of the United States operations, migrant workers and immigrant workers. And in the middle as a buffer were West Indians. West Indians were folks who were from the islands in the Caribbean. Many were Black, their ancestors having been brought over from Africa as part of the slave trade. And as a result of their race, they faced a lot of problems like racism and, issues getting jobs. And employment with United Fruit offered them some insulation from that. They were sent to Latin American countries and given pretty nicely paying managerial jobs. They were in supervisory positions. They got to run the show over the local people who were doing the tough on-the-ground work for very little pay, not even being paid in money. A lot of the time, they were given redeemable vouchers for select stores, which obviously I'm going to guess were owned by United Fruit. So
Cannot.
Yeah. So this stratification of workers along racial lines allowed United Fruit to encourage infighting among the groups rather than having the groups direct their anger at the company as a whole. If benefits were given to one group over another, it was because that group worked harder, so you just got to work more. If benefits were taken away or one group was punished, it was the other group's fault. They didn't work hard enough, and that's why everyone's being punished. Keep looking at each other. Don't look at us. And this is exactly what the British did in India with like the different religious groups there. They were like, oh, if the Muslims are mad, guess what? It's the Hindus. That's what they wanted. And so that's why this is happening. Oh, the Hindus are unhappy with this. It's the Sikhs.
It's a brilliant strategy.
Yeah, it worked for the most part. Anger was focused on the other ethnic groups within the company, not the company itself. And that helped to avoid revolts due to poor working conditions. And poor the conditions were, unsurprisingly, especially for those at the bottom. The hours were long. There were no days off. The sanitation in the housing that they were given was terrible. And when you take advantage of your workers, eventually they're going to fight back. Before we get to that, though, I need to introduce you to another big character in this saga, Samuel Zemurray, aka Sam the Banana Man.
Oh, bring in the banana man.
So Sam Zemurray was a businessman who ran his own fruit company, Cuyamel Fruit. Cuyamel was technically a rival of United Fruit, but it was actually kind of supported by them. So Zemurray and Preston signed an agreement in 1903 that any of United Fruit's ripe bananas upon arriving in the United States would go to Zemurray to sell. So like United Fruit keeps all the ones that aren't ripe yet because those are going to have a longer shelf life and they can take more time to sell them. But Zemurray's like, any bananas that are already ripe that you need to move fast, you give them to me and I'll get them sold. So that's their agreement.
Okay.
And he started making money, and then he bought a steamship company again with the help of United Fruit. So what's in it for United Fruit supporting a competitor? It helped them avoid being perceived as a monopoly. We have laws against that called antitrust laws, and you're going to get broken down into smaller companies as part of an antitrust lawsuit. United Fruit was buying up all of these smaller fruit companies and forming a monopoly, but then they would sell stakes in them when the government started sniffing around and being like, hey, seems like you're controlling maybe the entire fruit trade, and that feels maybe kind of not okay. And so, for example, Cuyamel Fruit, in 1913, Preston sold Zemurray the remaining 10% of stock in Cuyamel that United Fruit owned so that he could give the illusion of boosting a competitor. Zemurray eventually got rich enough to hand over U.S. distribution operations to a colleague, and in 1910, he headed down to Honduras and started snatching up land for banana plantations as well as other crops. He was very successful in Honduras, partially because he took part in generous tax breaks from the Honduran government. But then the Honduran government started imposing more taxes, and they also granted rights to build a railroad to a competing fruit company. That stymied Zemurray's efforts to expand his operations, and he did not like this Honduran government, so he decided to install a new one.
How very American of him.
Indeed. He was an immigrant. Well, he was technically American at this point, probably. So Zemurray got in touch with ousted Honduran president Manuel Bonilla and was like, hey, bud, how'd you like to get back in power? And Bonilla was like, I would love that. Thanks, bestie.
I would like that very much. Thank you.
In 1912, Zemurray hired a bunch of mercenaries, overthrew the Honduran government, and installed his new pal Bonilla, who of course gave him very generous tax breaks.
With zero regard for the people that this affects.
Yep, just like that. New government time.
Why not?
So Andrew Preston, president of United Fruit, died in 1924. And in 1929, United Fruit bought Cuyamel. And as a result, since Zemurray owned all of Cuyamel, he was now a massive shareholder in United Fruit, because I guess that's how business works. Anyway. Business, economics.
Bananas.
At the beginning of the 1930s, it was the Great Depression. Even United Fruit was not immune. The company was struggling, and Zemurray stepped in as managing director. And he fired, like, the whole board, who were apparently being really anti-Semitic and xenophobic to him. And they were like, we don't understand your accent. We can't understand what you're saying, blah, 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 blah.
Oh.
And one day he just stormed in and was like, can you understand this? You're all fired. Which I kind of am like, snaps.
Yeah.
Especially because I heard it described that they were all very like, probably people like Minor Keith, right? Who their daddies had gotten them this job. They had failed up into these positions of power and they were like Ivy League spoiled fucking brats. And then they were being assholes. And he was like, well, then you can get the fuck out. So yeah, he was like, this is my show now. And eventually he took over as president of the company. And it was a match made in heaven because this man who had just overthrown a whole ass government in order to keep selling bananas was now in charge of a company who had recently committed a whole ass massacre about the same thing. So talk about alignment. It's like the Triangle Shirtwaist founders all over again. Like,
yep.
You don't care about workers' rights? Me either. Let's start a sweatshop together.
Should we make out?
Should we just kiss a little? Yeah. So in 1928, United Fruit, with the help of the United States government, contributed to the killing of a whole bunch of people who had the nerve to go on strike against the company. I am not clear who was running United Fruit at this time because Preston was already dead and Zemurray hadn't taken over yet, but whoever it was, they were not fucking around. So in Colombia, United Fruit workers were suffering from the same issues as their counterparts in other countries, and they decided to stand up for themselves. And in 1928, they established a union. And as unions do, they created a list of demands and they sent it up to United Fruit on October 5th, 1928. These demands included such ludicrous things as 1 day off per week, sanitary living conditions.
Come on.
And actual money instead of company credit, which was how 30,000 people were being paid by United Fruit.
Was the voucher thing again?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
company credit / vouchers. One of the leaders of this union and of the strike was Erasmo Coronel, and I tried to find stuff about him because, we always try to talk about the people who don't get talked about. Unfortunately, there's like one Wikipedia entry on him, and it's like 4 lines, so we just don't know that much. But I wanted to say his name because, it's one of few names that we know from this side of the incident. United Fruit, of course, was like, fuck no, that's all going to cost us so much money. Because, if you can't exploit workers, it's terrible for your bottom line. There are no ethical large businesses, guys, because capitalism doesn't reward it. Whether you are benefiting from forced labor in prisons or sweatshops or child labor, there is something in your supply line if you are that big and that successful that is not cute.
Sorry to break it to you.
The other thing that's terrible for your bottom line is having to pay your own mercenaries or whatever to like subdue a striking workforce.
Ugh, what a pain.
Mm-hmm. So first, United Fruit went to the Colombian government and was like, guys, people are being so uncool. Can you just like stop them from striking? The Colombian government was like, no. But they did send soldiers to supervise the striking workers. These soldiers were led by General Carlos Cortés Vargas, and by day 2 of the strike, he was in Ciénaga, the big city in the banana zone.
The banana zone.
Which is what I'm going to start calling my crotch. Slide your big mic into my banana zone.
Oh, no.
Slide your succulent stalk into my banana zone.
No! No! God.
Anyway, they were in the big city, Ciénaga, in the banana zone, with a battalion of armed soldiers. So they're already like, if shit gets real, here we are. Back in the US, United Fruit started a strategic media campaign, as we will see them do again later with our friend Edward Bernays, framing the striking workers as part of a, quote, subversive movement of communists who were threatening democracy not only in Colombia, but the world over. No democracy is safe, yada, 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 yada.
It's just so lazy.
I know, right?
And it works, and it makes me so mad. Nothing has stopped you and never will.
Exactly. You are going to steamroll the world. United Fruit used that narrative that they had established in the media to push President Calvin Coolidge into supporting their efforts in Colombia, and Coolidge threw the weight of the U.S. government behind United Fruit. So the U.S. military didn't actually set foot in Colombia, but they threatened to. So Marines off the coast said that they would invade the country if the Colombian government did not take care of the strike.
That's insane.
Right? And Colombia, realizing that their whole fucking economy might collapse if they didn't play nice with the U.S., relented. On December 5th, about 2 months after the strike had begun, the striking workers were told that the governor of Magdalena, which is the region where the plantations were, wanted them to come to Ciénaga and work things out. So they began gathering in the city by the thousands, waiting to see what conditions would be met and how the strike would end. Just before midnight, General Vargas received a telegram from officials in the Colombian government declaring a state of siege in the area, aka like they're declaring martial law in response to the strike. So the military is now in charge. Reports of what happened and like the order that they happened in are really confused. Like I saw several different things that kind of said different stuff that maybe could all be true. I saw something that like crowds were fired on that night at a train station. I saw another report that they were fired on the next day in like a public square after church. I think the case might be that the square is where the train station was, and maybe the shooting took place after midnight. So it's said that it took place the next day because something said like when dawn broke, you could see the bodies. So I think it did happen kind of overnight. But I'm confused by this report of like some people were just there to go to church, but maybe it was a midnight mass. What is clear is that at some point, Vargas ordered his men who had surrounded this area of thousands of people to fire on the crowd. Many of these people weren't even actively striking. They were family members of workers. The ones who were striking, were like waiting to see what condition. It sounds like there was some shouting and back and forth between them and the soldiers. So there was probably some shit, but it didn't sound like any violence started until they just like started firing into this crowd. They were crowded into this area. They're surrounded by military, and Vargas orders them to disperse. And it's like some of them literally can't. And somebody else, I think, was kind of like, go fuck yourself. And so they didn't disperse. And then they just fired indiscriminately. So this set off a chain reaction of violence that lasted weeks. So the workers started destroying company buildings, including the engineer headquarters in Sevilla. Erasmo Coronel was killed in this incident, that leader that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Nowhere could I find how he was killed or by whom. But in 1980, in a United Fruit company warehouse in Panama, an anthropologist found a photograph of Coronel and 4 other union leaders, and the word out was written on it over him and another person. The photograph was attached to a memo that described Coronel being killed at this fight in Sevilla. And it also has status updates on the other 4, one of whom had been imprisoned. So that's the other one that's had the word out over him. The U.S. ambassador to Colombia at the time of the massacre was a human dumpster fire named Jefferson Caffrey.
Oh, excellent.
I've made this assumption about him being a human dumpster fire based entirely on this one statement that he made, but I think you will agree with me. In a dispatch to Washington 6 weeks after the massacre, he stated, quote, "I have the honor to report that the total number of strikers killed by the Colombian military exceeded 1,000.
Add him to the list of people I will be fighting
In a Denny's in
when
hell.
I die.
Yep. I hope there's a Denny's in hell, because that's where Larkin's going to fight.
Of course there's going to be a Denny's in hell. And it's going to be open all night.
Grand slamming people's faces into car windshields. It's like, do you hear yourself? Like you were celebrating the fact that over 1,000 people who were just on strike to get better working conditions were murdered by a government upon threat from your government.
Communists, Kate, not people.
That's right, of course. Subversive communist movement.
Yeah.
The total death toll of the massacre is unknown because bodies were disposed of in unknown locations. Some said they were like packed onto trains and dumped in the ocean. Some said they were like just dumped in back areas. We don't even know. But the estimate is between 1,000 and 3,000 people were killed in retaliation for the strike. The Colombian president vaguely blamed foreign agitators for the actions taken by the Colombian government, by which, of course, he means the American Marines who were like,
right,
do this or we're going to invade you. General Vargas stated that he ordered his men to open fire because he was told to subdue the issue as quickly as possible under threat of foreign invasion.
Right, which is terrifying.
And United Fruit continued to operate in Colombia, as did Chiquita, which it eventually turned into. And we'll get back to that in a second. Okay, I know we've already come so far, we've covered a lot, but I do want to talk about the one last event that I briefly covered in our Bacon and Eggs episode, the overthrow of Guatemalan President Jacobo Arbenz. In 1944, so well into Zamuri's time as head of United Fruit, Guatemala experienced an uprising that ended the 14-year rule of a military dictator who was very friendly to United Fruit, as dictators tended to be. He was replaced by Juan José Arevalo, a professor who had been living in exile in Argentina. And Arevalo introduced democracy to Guatemala, meaning that workers were now allowed to strike, which was an uh-oh for United Fruit, obviously.
Right, uh-oh.
Jacobo Arbenz succeeded Arevalo in 1951, and he really ramped up reform. He wanted his people to prosper, and he thought to himself, there is a lot of uncultivated land owned by plantations here, by companies. And what if we redistributed that land to the people? Again, uncultivated land, because, yeah, United Fruit wasn't just cultivating every inch of the land that they owned. They were letting a lot of it just sit there. And United Fruit and other companies owned 90% of the land in Guatemala. So that left only 10% to 90% of the population, most of whom were indigenous Guatemalans. And a lot of those folks relied on farming as their main source of income. And so uncultivated land would be like a huge gift to people in poverty. So between 1951 and 1953, Arbenz redistributed over 1 million acres of land from private companies to poor Guatemalan families. And he also threatened to build a highway so that the fruit companies didn't have exclusive control over transit anymore. And he threatened to build a hydroelectric plant to take back control of the power grid.
Hell yeah.
How much of the redistributed land belonged to United Fruit? Again, a little unclear. There was a lot of inconsistency that I found in reporting about this. So one article said 100,000 acres, another said 400,000 acres. In any case, United Fruit was pissed, even though the Guatemalan government was offering to pay them exactly what they claimed the land was worth on their tax assessments, which was $1,185,000. So they were like, you can have that amount.
You can have that. If that's what you say it's worth, then sure.
And suddenly, of course, United Fruit was like, no, actually, it's worth over $19 million, so we're going to need that amount. And Arbenz was like, no. If it's worth that amount, that's what you should have reported on your taxes, and that's what you should have been paying taxes on. So United Fruit did United Fruit shit and ran to the President of the United States for help. Now, since this pesky new democracy had been in Guatemala for a while, United Fruit had had a chance to once again develop a media strategy to deal with it. And this time they had hired our buddy, Edward Bernays, to help them. Bernays! If you haven't listened to our episode about him, go do. It's episode 11, Bacon and Eggs. But briefly, Bernays was a master propagandist. He literally wrote the book called Propaganda, and he invented a lot of techniques that were based in advertising based on appealing to psychology and emotion versus actual, like, just selling the product. So he is a master manipulator. They hire Bernays to A, help them sell more bananas, and B, deal with Arbenz. Bernays got bananas into every aspect of American life. He sold them as super healthy, which, to be fair, they are. He installed bananas in hotels, railway dining cars, movie sets as part of craft services. He was like, use bananas. And he also had his eye on the Guatemala situation from the start, and he was raising alarm bells about it very early on. Like, strikes were cropping up. People could now earn more than 50 cents a day. It was the worst.
The worst.
So Bernays said to United Fruit, like, listen, I have picked 10 of the most widely circulated publications in the US, like Reader's Digest, and we are going to convince them each to run a slightly different story about what's going on in Guatemala, and we will imply that Arbenz is a communist dictator being influenced by the Soviet Union, which at this point in the 50s is like, whoa! Cold War times, really freaked out about commies now. Articles started appearing in the New York Times and other big publications about the growing communist threat in Guatemala.
Oh my God.
So in March of 1952, Guatemala actually offered United Fruit a labor contract that it really wanted. And company officials thought, like, oh, this is a win. But Bernays was like, no. The commies are scared. They're backing up. This is a tactical retreat. So instead of easing off, we need to be more aggressive because we've got them in a corner. Over the next 2 years, Bernays wrote letters to United Fruit's publicity chief outlining strategies, including publications about the threat of communism, setting up a network of spies in Central America to be coordinated by, quote, the company's State Department, which is a wild thing to say.
Excuse?
Because he's like, yeah, this company is the government, so our State Department.
I mean, yeah,
So Bernays' efforts paid off, and President Eisenhower was convinced that Arbenz was a threat, a dictator who had seized lands from an American company because of his hatred of capitalism, and Eisenhower also owned stock in United Fruit, as did many other prominent politicians. So Eisenhower...
See, how is that even fucking allowed? Anyway.
I know.
I could smash everything for this.
So Eisenhower authorized the CIA to help overthrow Arbenz. On June 18th, 1954, exiled Army officer Castillo Armas crossed the border with 200 men trained by the CIA, whom Bernays apparently called the Army of Liberation.
I hate him.
So this Army of Liberation was supported by a CIA air attack, and in about a week, they had succeeded in overthrowing Arbenz. He resigned out of fear for his life, and Armas was installed in power and immediately gave the land back to United Fruit and proceeded to run the country as an actual dictator. And he was a puppet for United Fruit for years and years. His dictatorship caused a civil war that started in the 60s and lasted over 30 years, resulting in about 200,000 deaths, most of whom were Mayans, so indigenous Guatemalans.
Right.
This civil war cost more lives than any war in Latin American history. And it was caused in large part by United Fruit just wanting a friendly dictator in there and overthrowing a guy who wanted to give land back to the people.
It's absolutely wild and unconscionable. So that was the third installment of a new leader? No, that would be the fourth changeover.
Third, I think. But the Honduran one wasn't United Fruit. It was Cuyamel. It was Zermuri before he was with United Fruit. It's another fruit company.
Right, just a capitalistic move facilitated by the federal government.
Oh, yeah, like Latin America and Central America were just like a playground for bad behaved men to do whatever they wanted to make their money.
And I think it's even more hyper disgusting to me because that's what it is. It's just boys playing around and fighting on literal sacred ground. Ugh! It makes my stomach hurt.
It's I want what I want and I'm going to get it. However, I need to get it, and that's capitalism.
No regard for the earth or people.
Eventually, as I alluded to, United Fruit did come to an end. Well, not really. It just became a new entity. In 1984, it became Chiquita, which still dominates the banana industry in Guatemala and elsewhere, along with the two other big banana companies, Del Monte and Dole. So what's the state of things now?
Yeah.
Still shit. Still
yeah,
shit.
It's shit.
Yeah. The National Consumers League found that child labor is a major problem in banana production. A survey done in Ecuador, where Dole, Del Monte, and Chiquita all operate, found that children as young as 5 could be working on farms and plantations. In Costa Rica and elsewhere, harsh pesticides are used to maintain banana crops. Crop dusters rain these pesticides down on fields full of workers, allegedly. These pesticides have effects like seizures, paralysis, and death. And those big 3 companies I just mentioned, Dole, Del Monte, and Chiquita, have claimed that they don't hold responsibility for the illness and death of workers exposed to pesticides. They blame the workers for not taking proper safety precautions. These companies are not supposed to be spraying fields where workers are currently working. They are also supposed to do stuff like check wind patterns so they don't spray schools and residential areas, but reports from workers and other locals on the ground are that they just do it anyway. In 2007, Chiquita pled guilty to supporting terrorism in Colombia after it was discovered that they had been making long-term payments to an organization known as the AUC, which is a right-wing paramilitary group that has a reputation for attacks on human rights.
Okay, so that's out, and we know that.
The AUC's claim, this paramilitary group, is that it was founded to protect landowners from attacks by left-wing rebels. Really, they were mostly a death squad for drug traffickers, and they regularly engaged in trafficking, extortion, and murder, and they would also attack villages that were suspected of supporting the left-wing rebels. This lawsuit was brought against Chiquita by 8 Colombian families whose family members had been killed by the AUC, and it was found that Chiquita had paid the AUC $1.7 million between 1997 and 2004. Chiquita claims that it was threatened by the group, that they were told the land and the workers of their subsidiary there, Banadex, would be harmed. There was like some meeting in 1997, and the leader of this group was like, we're going to start burning all your lands and hurting your workers if you don't give us all this money. What would you do in that situation? As a fruit company who has previously successfully asked presidents to intervene on your behalf, would you just be like, I guess we got to pay them, we're helpless?
Like you give a shit about your workers to begin with.
What do the left-wing rebels want? Probably more workers' rights and unions and
Right,
shit.
right.
Being like, oh, we're so scared and we wanted to protect our workers. That's so laughable, given the size of the company and the other shit that I just mentioned. So per the Department of Justice, senior executives at Chiquita knew they were paying the AUC. The payments were reviewed and approved by high-ranked executives. They also knew that the AUC was a violent extremist group, and they continued paying them for years after the AUC was designated by the American government as a foreign terrorist organization in 2001. So when an employee discovered this designation, they raised the alarm and were like, hey, we're paying a foreign terrorist organization. And Chiquita then talked to a law firm who was like, absolutely stop paying them.
Absolutely stop.
Justice Department report on this is hilarious. It's so shady. Like, they're like, here are some snippets from what their lawyers said to them. And it's like, do not pay them money. Stop paying. We must stop paying. Our legal advice to you is stop paying these people. But Chiquita didn't listen. Eventually, the board of Chiquita found out about these payments, and one of them was like, okay, so like that needs to stop, and maybe we just don't operate in Colombia anymore. Like,
Right?
we just pull out of Colombia. The board disclosed the payments to the Department of Justice, but Chiquita's employees in Colombia were ordered to keep paying. They made 20 more payments to the AUC after the Department of Justice was informed, until Chiquita sold Banadex in 2004. As for all that infrastructure that United Fruit built around its operations, a lot of it is still there. Some structures are abandoned. Some of the land is still owned by United Fruit, by Chiquita, and it's used to produce palm oil. But that's a ruin for another day.
Fuck's sake.
So yeah, in conclusion, there's always money in the banana stand, which means there will always be human rights violations in the banana stand.
Forever and always. Wow. I'm furious. And it's manifesting as like this exhaustion.
Oh my God, but of course.
You can't escape it.
Yeah, good luck finding a banana in a grocery store that is not Chiquita, Dole, or Del Monte.
You cannot. And so that's like the horrible curse of our existence. Well, thank you
You're so
so
welcome.
much. I will be taking this shirt off now,
Start distancing yourself from bananas a little bit.
emotionally and physically. It's so appallingly disgusting. We're just going to keep doing it. We're just going to keep poisoning children and poisoning the ground and killing the ground through monoculture.
Who's going to stop them? Well, we have a shout out.
Oh, right. Yes.
Big thank you to my cousin Betsy McCormick for joining our Gin and Tonics
Betsy.
tier. Yes.
Thank you, Betsy.
All right, well, we'll be back at you. I think next one will be a Thanksgiving episode. Tell your friends, tell your enemies. We love you. Nope.
Nooch.
I was gonna say like give yourself nutrition. I was like, nutrify yourself.
No. And it came out as nooch.
Nooch, because I stopped because I was like, what word am I trying to say right now? Eat something healthy. Be good to yourself. Fight the power.